Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out today. My name is Jonathan McCoy, and I'm the Vice President of the MLK Association. And as we get started, I first want us to take a moment to thank Ramona Young and her team at Kente Kitchen, who's provided us that nice repast that is back there in the back. So that's Ramona and her team right back there in the back, as you see. And we're blessed that they are feeding us tonight and tomorrow. And I think this is a preview of what will be on tap also for the gala, because they'll be providing the food for the gala on Saturday evening. So if you want to come out and dance to some music and have some good food that you know is good because you've had a taste of it, please think about coming to the gala. That'll be at AV Tech Conference Center, and that'll be Saturday evening from 6 to 9. And there's tickets that you can grab right back there where you signed in at. Again, thank you for coming this evening, because this is a special evening. In fact, this is the third service that we've had, the third year that we're having this service in memory of Michael Schwerner and James Chaney and Andrew Goodman, honoring their spirit of service, their spirit of social justice, and their spirit of working for unity. To give background to why we have this service and who these men are, you look back in 1964. In 1964, Bob Moses, who was the secretary of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, better known as SNCC, he was the secretary there in their organization in Mississippi. He outlined a plan that became known as Freedom Summer. His idea that there'd be 10 weeks where white students from the North would actually come down into Mississippi and join activists who were working in Mississippi, mostly Black activists already. So you will have this integrated effort, North and South, Black and white, working throughout Mississippi in a massive effort to force the national media to cover what was going on in Mississippi. Forced them to be aware and to acknowledge the entrenched violence and the massive injustice that was taking place in Mississippi and, by extension, across the South. Now, Mickey Schwerner and James Chaney and Andrew Goodman volunteered to be part of this event, part of this effort to come down into Mississippi. These three men believed that the work was necessary, but also, as they knew that the work was necessary, they also knew and understood that it was dangerous. In 1964, the Ku Klux Klan had a membership in Mississippi alone of over 10,000 members. And as we know from studying our history and living the history, the Klan was not scared to use violence to further their ideas of white supremacy. And over the course of the summer, members of the Ku Klux Klan had burned about 20 Black churches in Mississippi. And on June 16th, Klan members targeted there in Neshoba County the Church of Mount Zion Baptist Church. That's where Mickey Schwerner has spent time working with the members of the congregation and extension of members of the community. But he wasn't there that day on June 16th when the Klan came to burn down the church. But he did come back a few days later, along with Goodman and Chaney, and they viewed the remains, the charred remains of the church. And they left, got in a car to return to Meridian. And as they were driving back to Meridian, their car was stopped, their station wagon was stopped by the police. Chaney was driving, but all three were arrested. Chaney was charged with speeding. That's why they had been pulled over. He was speeding, but they were all guilty of something, and they were taken to Philadelphia, the town of Philadelphia there in Neshoba County, to be held. They were arrested by Deputy Sheriff Cecil Price and jailed by him, and his name will come up later. This happened at 4 p.m. At 10 p.m., Chaney paid his fine, and the three men were released from jail, and they were told to get out of the county. They got into their car, and they were never seen alive again. On June 23rd, the FBI investigators found the station wagon. It was still smoldering from attempts to burn it and an attempt to conceal evidence. That was June 23rd, but nobody knew where the bodies were or if the young men were still alive. And so a search was going to begin. It drew national attention because, in part, Schwerner and Goodman were white men. Mickey Schwerner's wife, Rita, actually pointed this out to the press. She said, "The slaying of a Negro in Mississippi is not news. It's only because my husband and Andrew Goodman were white that the national alarm had been sounded." But investigators came into Mississippi and they flooded. And throughout the month of July, they searched in the woods, in the fields, in the swamps, in the rivers, all across Mississippi, trying to find these three men. In the process of their search, though, they did find the remains of 8 black men. 2 of the remains were identified as missing college students Henry D. and Charles Moore. But the other 6 men still, we don't know the identity of them. On August 4th, now again, they went missing on the 21st of June. This is why we have this ceremony during this week, the 21st of June. You know, we celebrate Juneteenth on the 19th, and you think about so soon right after that, you have this. So they've been gone since the 21st of June. And on August 4th, the FBI got a tip from an informant. Later on, we find out that the informant that gave this tip was a Mississippi Highway Patrol officer named Maynard King. So again, you see this interlay with the Klan, but with law enforcement. Because how would a Mississippi Highway Patrol officer know where these men were at? But following the tip, the FBI did find the bodies of the 3 men in an earthen dam on the old Jolly Farm outside of Philadelphia, the town that had been jailed in. On December 4th, the Justice Department charged 21 men with conspiring to violate Schwerner and Chaney's Goodman's civil rights. The federal grand jury indicted 18 of the 21 men in January of 1965. But in the following month, the presiding judge dismissed the charges against most of the defendants, insisting that the law about violating their civil rights did not pertain to civilians. It could only be used against those in law enforcement. In this case, that would be Deputy Sheriff Price, the one who arrested them, the county sheriff, and a patrolman. So you go from 21 to 18 to 3. The prosecution, of course, appealed. They wanted all 18 to go on trial. In 1966, the Supreme Court reinstated the charges, ruling that the law did apply to both law enforcement officials and to civilians. In February 1967, another federal grand jury indicted the 18 men again. And the jury found 7 of those defendants guilty. And after unsuccessful appeals, the convicted men entered prison early in 1970. Each of those men that were convicted have been sentenced to between 3 to 10 years, but ultimately none served more than 6 years behind bars. Now, if you continue to read some more of this history, you'll find there were a retrial and another conviction that goes on. But the important part of why we also have this service is to remember these men, but remember the efforts that they were working on to work to unite a community across regional lines, racial lines, religious lines. because the violence of the Freedom Summer helped convince President Lyndon B. Johnson and Congress at that time to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race and color, religion, sex, or national origin. And it helped spur the passing of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that prohibits any voting practice or procedure, including redistricting and vote dilution, that discriminates against racial or language minorities. That was passed in 65, but we know here in 2026 what has happened, that over the years, the Supreme Court has worked and helped dilute the protections that were written into the Voting Rights Act. The latest just happened in April. The 63 decision in what is known as Louisiana versus Callis, it makes it harder for people to challenge racial discriminatory voter maps or voting practices. And as we've seen since April, there's been a rush to redistricting and to dilute Black voting power across the South. All this underscores the importance of the work and the spirit of these three men, and the importance of us gathering tonight, the importance of fighting for justice, fighting for opportunities, and fighting for equality. And that can only come through community vigilance, through unity, and community action. I now ask Rabbi Alterman to come forward.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I apologize for the laptop. I could not get the printer to work, and nowadays, calling a random 12-year-old off the street to help you, they've never used a printer. The Mourner's Kaddish, which is the prayer that I'll be reading, is ancient in origin. It was composed by the men of the Great Assembly, which included a number of prophets that we're familiar with, who were trying to give the Jewish people something to hold on to at the time of the destruction of the temple, which was a massive historical event and had a huge effect on Jewish practice today. It's in Aramaic, which is printed in the same characters as Hebrew, but it is in fact a different language of the Semitic languages. And it's in Aramaic in part because Hebrew at the time was used in government, it was used in prayer during temple ritual, and the upper class used it conversationally, but ordinary people spoke Aramaic. So it was a prayer that everyone had access to. And in response to that historical tragedy and the subsequent exile, the words of Ezekiel were used as sort of a starting point. I have exalted and sanctified my name, and I have made it known in the eyes of all the nations, and they shall know that I am the Lord. I'd like to say that the story of these three men is one that I grew up with, and I'm sure we're all familiar with people saying that someone gave their life for for a cause or for beliefs or for ideals, but they didn't give them. Their lives were brutally taken away from them. They went to do that work with the knowledge that that was a risk because it had happened to people before. They understood what they were stepping up to do, and they did so willingly. But I'll never accept that giving their lives is what happened. So in honor and remembrance of James, Andrew, and Michael, 3 men who bravely stood up against injustice and oppression, we dedicate this mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach cherutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'kol beit Yisrael, ba'al gola u'v'zman kariv v'imru omein. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olmei olmaya. Yiparak v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudasho brichu. Le'ela min kol brochata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlomo Rabba min shemaya v'chaim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bin Ramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. The last words in English. May the one who creates peace in the celestial heights, may he create peace for us and for all Israel and all the people of the world. And let us say, Amen. Thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor.
Sometimes we get asked why we start this week with such a solemn occasion. But I think it's important because it puts everything in perspective of what Juneteenth is. Juneteenth is known as Jubilation Day. Joy and jubilation comes because you know pain and sorrow. You've experienced pain, you've experienced sorrow, you've experienced loss. And the joy, the happiness, the jubilation is the total opposite of that. Pulled from the lowest part, you now reach the highest point. And so we do start this week with a solemn occasion so that by the time we get to the 19th of June and Juneteenth, we can release our joy and jubilation of the hope that has been realized, understanding that work still needs to be done, but that we have come through the valley of darkness and are experiencing light. And so that's why we have this ceremony to start this week, so you can feel the joy, celebrate on Friday, on Juneteenth, and bring others into the celebration. Please take that with you.